Welcome back to Capitol Tonight. On Monday, Democrats in New York voted down the redistricting maps sent to them by the Independent Redistricting Commission. Remember, the commission, it's the first time that a commission or a group other than lawmakers or courts has been given the task of drawing up the new lines in New York. Now that the commission's first attempt has failed, it still has one more bite at the apple before lawmakers themselves get a crack at drawing new maps. My next guest, Senate Deputy Majority Leader Mike Gianaris, is a Queens Democrat. He's also the co-chair of the New York State Legislative Task Force on Reapportionment and Redistricting, better known as LAT4, which is the group that will draw the lines if the Independent Redistricting Commission fails to do so. It's a lot of information, but Senator Gianaris is here to explain it all to us. Welcome back, Senator. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Susan. Thanks for having me on.
So first and foremost, you have been a vocal critic of the Independent Redistricting Commission ever since it was put into place in 2014, I believe. Why is that?
Well, first, let me distinguish. I was a critic and I am a critic of the structure and the process that was set up. But I think the individual commissioners are dedicated individuals who are doing their best in this situation. But the structure of it was flawed at the outset. It was a deal between then Governor Cuomo and the Senate Republicans because the Republicans at the time saw the writing on the wall. They knew it would take the majority in the Senate eventually. And they tried to establish a structure that continued to give them undue influence over the process. And you're seeing the consequences of that now with the gridlocked commission, super majority requirements only for Democrats, not if the Republicans were in charge, and a structure that is struggling, to say the least.
Yeah, now I mentioned that the Redistricting Commission does have another chance to draw the lines, but if those maps are voted down, which some say is likely, your group, LAT4, will draw the maps. Now, there is some speculation, Senator, that the commission was sort of designed to fail. Can you respond to that?
Well, that's what we were just discussing, right? It was set up it's less independent than bipartisan. It's got 5 commissioners effectively appointed by either party. And much like we see with the boards of elections throughout the state, when you're setting something up equally split between the parties, you end up with results that are equally split between the parties, which is why we had 2 sets of maps we were looking at. And so we didn't have anything to do with setting up that structure. I think it was flawed at the outset, but we're doing the best we can. We're respecting the commission. We will certainly review the second submission they send us in the next 15 days and decide accordingly from there.
All right, so let's fast forward. Let's say if it comes to that, LAT4 would have to draw the lines, and you're the co-commissioner, or the co-chair rather, of LAT4. You have said to my colleagues at New York One that you would be able to move quickly if the commission's maps are voted down a second time. Is LAT4 already in the process of map making?
No, we are thinking about concepts, certainly. We're looking at the maps that have been presented to us. We are reviewing the public comments in the thousands that the Independent Redistricting Commission received over their several months of hearings. And so we're thinking about what we may do to respond perhaps differently than the commission did in its multiple submissions. But we have not put pen to paper at this point in time. It's something that would have to be negotiated also with the Assembly. So all of that remains to be done. However, we don't have a choice. We're going to have to move quickly if it comes to that. All the maps, we're committed to not changing the political calendar. That calls for the June primary and petitions to begin March 1. The boards of elections tell us that they need 3 to 4 weeks to put the election districts on the maps before petitions can begin. All of which is to say this whole process needs to be concluded by early February, and we're committed to doing that.
Time is of the essence. So upstate Republican Congressman Tom Reed has called out Democrats who in Washington are pushing for voting and redistricting reform, but in Albany may end up, I mean, you tell me, may end up drawing gerrymandered maps in New York to help Congress from falling into the hands of Republicans. Reed called this position hypocritical. It does sound a little inconsistent. How do you respond to that?
Well, there's a lot of presumptions built into that. First of all, unlike in many states around the country, Republican-led states that are gerrymandering for partisan reasons to their heart's content, here in New York, we have specific restrictions against drawing the maps for partisan purposes or to protect an incumbent, for example. And so we're mindful of that. We are restricted by that. So we're going to come up with maps that are fair. Now, New York is a blue state, as everybody knows. So I would caution everyone when the maps are finally concluded not to look at the results and say, well, it must be partisan because Democrats would win most of the seats. Well, most of the state is Democrat. So that's just the byproduct of the way the voters of the state vote and are registered and prefer. But we're multiple steps from that happening. Like I said, we want to respect the commission's process. We are going to await their second submission, look at that, evaluate that, and then move from there.
But like you said, everything is going to happen, 1, 2, 3. So how much pressure is on LAT4 coming from Congress, for example, or, people like Sean Patrick Maloney, who is in charge of getting Democrats elected in Congress, to, really gerrymander up those maps and get as many Democrats in there as possible?
Well, as I just mentioned, we're very sensitive to the requirements that we have.
But we all know that
intentionally. Well, but let me just say, we have been very consciously and intentionally keeping people with partisan interest at arm's length. I can tell you, I have not had a single conversation with Sean Patrick Maloney about the details of the lines and what they should look like. I think he knows the legal structure that we're dealing with, and we do as well. To the extent I've received any communications from elected officials about the lines, I've cut them short and told them to submit their testimony to the IRC, the independent commission, and then we will review the public testimony that they've received. But we have been very intentionally not having those conversations.
Very illuminating conversation with Senate Deputy Majority Leader Mike Gianaris, a Queens Democrat and co-chair of LAT4, the Legislative Task Force on Redistricting. It's great to see you, and thank you again.
Thanks so much, Susan.